that all these plans will have to include. Now, those plans may make your policy more expensive. They may include benefits you don't want. You know, you may be a non-drinker, but you'll have to have drug and alcohol rehabilitation therapy in your plan, which is one of the mandates. And, you know, they may even include benefits you're morally opposed to, like, say, abortion coverage. But you will have to change your current policy and buy the plan that has the benefits the government wants. If you have an employer-provided plan today, remember there's an employer mandate in addition to the individual mandate. Under the employer mandate, under the House bill, if your business does not provide insurance to their workers and pay at least 85% of the cost of that insurance for an individual, 65% for a family, then they must pay an 8% payroll tax as a penalty. I'm sorry, the president says that's not a tax. That's an 8% penalty to the IRS, collected by the tax collectors. So businesses will have 5 years under this bill to change their current plan to one that meets all the obligations, all the benefits that are spelled out by the mandate. And if you have an individual plan, you actually are grandfathered in. You can keep your current plan as long as you make no changes to that plan. So if you get married and add a spouse, if you have a kid and add the kid to the plan, or if you change any benefits to the plan in any way, then you must change your plan to meet the new set of benefits that the government wants you to have. So under the individual and employer mandates, almost everybody will ultimately have to change their current plan. Second, if you have a health savings account today, it will go away under all of these bills. These bills essentially they don't actually attack the health savings account. They're very smart about this. What they do is they eliminate the possibility of a high deductible policy that goes with your HSA. They prohibit those high deductible policies, and since the law says you have to have a high deductible policy with your HSA, essentially you no longer can have your HSA. You will lose your HSA. Third, and this one, your senator from Florida has actually been very active on this one. The plan would eliminate many of the payments that are made to Medicare Advantage program, the Medicare Advantage program. Right now, they receive a subsidy. The president calls it an unwarranted subsidy, but we can debate that. But essentially, it would cut back on the reimbursement rates that the government provides to insurers to participate in the Medicare Advantage program. Those insurers have been very straightforward about saying that if that happens, they will stop offering the Medicare Advantage plans, which means the 1 in 5 seniors who currently are on Medicare Advantage will be forced back into traditional Medicare. They will lose their current Medicare Advantage plan and have to go into traditional Medicare, which offers fewer benefits and different types of plans. And then finally, if there is a public option, you could be forced into the public option. Now, the idea is, of course, the public option, and then people try to sell it. The other side talks about it, says, look, we're talking about a choice. All we're going to do is an option. We're going to create this public, government-run healthcare program, and it's simply going to compete with private insurance. Now, what could be better? You guys, people like me, I'm supposed to be in favor of competition, choice. What could be fairer? Now, that might be true if this government plan was going to compete on anything close to a level playing field. But does anyone really believe the government's going to compete fairly with private insurance? Now, actually, the bill actually says they're going to have to go out and they're going to have to support themselves based on their premiums, for example. Well, what happens if they get it wrong and they lose money? They're going to go out of business? Nobody likes to sign up for the public option, so they're going to go broke? Do we really believe the government's going to say, well, we tried, didn't work, public option's out of business? Just like Fannie and Freddie. Or do we think that the government might bail them out? The fact is there will be an implicit, if not an explicit, guarantee that the government will pick up the tab, and that means that the public option can always underprice private insurance. And when it does this, businesses aren't dumb. They're going to look at this and say, public option is cheap, my current insurance expensive, all my workers are going in that public option, and they're going to dump them into the public plan. And there's a study by the actuarial firm Lewin and Associates out there that suggests 89.5 million Americans would ultimately be dumped into the public option, which is about half, a little over half, of all the insured people in the country. And then you wonder what will happen to private insurance once they lose half their customers. Will it still be a viable industry? Will it simply go away and we'll be left with a single payer system, which is what the supporters of the public option say they want? So, couldn't you keep your current insurance? No, you can't. Second question I'm asked, how are you going to pay for all this? Now, these bills are expensive. You know, sometimes the numbers are thrown around. The House bill is supposed to cost $1.3 trillion over the first 10 years. The Senate Health Committee bill is a little cheaper, about $1.2 trillion. And the Senate Finance bill, I'll tell you, they've cut to the bone. We're down, it was about $890 billion right now. It was actually about $865, but they've been adding amendments to it. It's been going up. About $890 billion right now. Now, of course, I remember when $890 billion was real money. You know, today it's a rounding error in some of the bailouts, but the bigger problem is that those numbers are very misleading. The reason for that is the way the Congressional Budget Office works. In fact, they have to by law. They can look at a 10-year budget window, and that starts next year. So they look at these bills and they say between 2010, next year, and 2019, how much will it cost? They say, well, for the House bill, it'll cost $1.3 trillion during that period. But the plan doesn't go into effect until 2014. And in fact, it goes into effect so slowly that in 2014, it only costs $6 billion. It all ratchets up after that. The trajectory, by the time you get to 2019, it looks like this. And then they come in arbitrary window, stops. That's the end of the cost. If you look out beyond 2019, that trajectory just keeps going up. In fact, if you looked at these over an actual 10-year of operation, say from 2014 to 2024, that House bill doesn't cost $1.3 trillion, it costs $2.4 trillion. And that Senate Finance Committee bill doesn't cost $890 billion, it costs $1.7 trillion. And how are they going to pay for it? Well, first, taxes. A lot of taxes. In the House bill, $880 billion over the first 10 years in new taxes, including a surtax on the wealthy, a number of business taxes, and so on. In the Senate bill, the Senate Finance Committee bill, well, they only got about $250 billion in taxes. That's this tax on insurance plans of 40%. It was 35%. It's gone up now to 40% tax on insurance plans that cost more than $8,000 for an individual or $21,000 for a family. There'll be a 40% excise tax imposed on those insurance plans. They also have $100 billion or so, and what they're saying are not taxes, they are fees that they are assessing on hospitals, medical device manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, and insurers. Of course, we know those costs would never be passed down to the people who are consuming the health care. So those taxes are number one. Number two is debt. The president says he's not going to sign a bill that adds to the national debt. Well, he's going to have some problems because the House bill, according to the Congressional Budget Office, in that first 10 years, remember that's 2010 to 2019 for a plan that doesn't start to 2014. But in those first 6 years of operation of the plan, it's $285 billion in the red. Actually, over the first 10 years operation of the plan, it's around $1.5 trillion in the red. And in fact, if you actually took that House bill and you treated it like any other entitlement program, like Medicare or Social Security, and you had to have a 75-year actuarial balance, its unfunded liabilities are $9.2 trillion. So there's a little bit of deficit there. Now, the Senate Finance Committee, in all fairness, the Senate Finance Committee bill actually is deficit neutral. Theirs does not add any new debt.